Penguin Random House Audio presents The Apartment on Calle Uruguay by Zachary Lazar. Read for you by Peter Ganim. For Kuntos Kunquest and Layla Roberts. I saw that under the mask of these half-humorous innuendos, this old seaman, as an insulated Quakerish Nantucketer, was full of his insular prejudices and rather distrustful of all aliens, unless they hailed from Cape Cod or the Vineyard. But what takes thee a whaling? I want to know that before I think of shipping ye. Well, sir, I want to see what whaling is. I want to see the world. Want to see what whaling is, eh? Have ye clapped eye on Captain Ahab? Who is Captain Ahab, sir? Aye, I thought so. Captain Ahab is the captain of this ship. Herman Melville, from Moby Dick. Chapter 1. Imagine watching the raw footage of every minute of your life, what you were seeing, hearing, feeling, thinking, including moments you barely noticed or didn't notice at all. Then imagine entering that stream at random and trying to recognize where you were, what was happening. Would what had seemed important still seem important in the same way? Would what had seemed trivial or had never even registered seem rich with interest now that you were viewing it so close up and with such urgency? The flash of life from dead matter, mineral to plant, plant to animal, animal to human with mind and soul, or at least the idea of mind and soul. There were all these miracles presenting themselves every second of our lives, and then there was the destructiveness of that summer, that year, the years to follow. I hadn't seen my neighbor Diana very much lately. She was busy with work, as she usually was, but that evening both of us happened to have had a free moment at the same time. I had just gotten off the phone with a curator who wanted to ask me a few questions about Malika, and it was confusing, as if for a moment Malika were still alive, and I was in this kind of a fog when I wandered down the path, past the house Diana rented part of, toward the pond. The house she rented in was a yellow bungalow with reclaimed junk in the front yard, old desks and chairs and stereo consoles that her new boyfriend Sebastian seemed to be making a habit of refinishing in a slow, mostly imperceptible way. Diana was my age, late 40s or early 50s, someone who had been through a lot. I knew too much about her from being her next-door neighbor, and since the advent of Sebastian, she had bloomed into some version of who she'd probably been a long time ago. Sebastian was maybe 20 years younger, with a muscular build and kinky blonde hair, and he went around shirtless, like a TV star from the 70s. He'd told me once how much he liked older women, the character in their faces. I didn't know where he was that afternoon. It was just Diana, who was down at the dock when I got there, hoisting herself up onto the planks after a swim, a tattoo of a cresting wave on her belly just above the waistline. "The damn geese," she said. "All this shit on the dock. I don't know what to do about it." She shook water out of her hair, then wrapped herself in an old beach towel the color of split pea soup. "Not really my skill set," I said. "How was the sailing yesterday?" "Fine. Windy. Nothing great. I don't weigh much, so I'm not much good in the wind." "I thought wind was kind of the point." Kind of, sort of. Her gaze was suggestive sometimes, flirty, Sebastian notwithstanding, but there was hostility buried in it that I don't think she thought I could see, and maybe couldn't see herself. She always thought I came from Brooklyn, which I guessed had something to do with the color of my skin. This kind of friction was worse now, since the election that fall, though I doubted Diana voted that way, if she voted at all, unless she did, smiling suggestively at me as she had before. "August," I said. "We're going to grill tonight, if you want to come by." "You and Sebastian." "And some of his friends. They're all coming from the city. He's on his way back now. He just finished a job." "I'll try to stop by." "Well, keep it in mind." "Thank you." "You going in?" "Yeah, right now." The pond was more than 2 miles across. I'd heard people say it looked like New Hampshire or Vermont, which were places I had never stayed in long enough to actually see. I think what they meant was the pond was surrounded by pine trees, very thick in the distance, as well as deciduous ones, oaks and maples and tupelos. Diana feared the pond was dying, and that one day it would truly die. An algal bloom would kill all the fish. The egrets had already stopped roosting in the trees in the evenings. But for now, there were still perch and even some bass, despite the chemicals leaching in from people's lawns. And in at least this diminished sense, the pond survived. I dove straight off the dock, reaching forward and hitting the water at just the right angle, and swam underwater for as long as I could. It was warm, though still cooler than the air, and swimming through it felt purifying. When I came up, I was facing the deepest part of the pond, and the nearest trees were very far away, and because there were no houses on that side, it was like I had traveled many miles. To Vermont, perhaps, instead of just swimming 40 or 50 yards. The water was blue when you looked across it at the distant shore, but when you looked up close, it was striated with white and gray waveforms that moved and regenerated endlessly. I thought about the curator who had called about Malika earlier. As I got older, I had more, not less, trouble locating myself in the changes I'd gone through. Maybe everyone felt that way at my age, though perhaps they didn't feel that the changes were so senseless. The curator was writing descriptive text about an artist's book Malika had made called Darkadia, after a fictional island nation, part Caribbean, part New York City, that constituted the book's purported subject. I saw now that it was really Malika's outsider vision of Manhattan, that she was trying to see the city around her from an estranged perspective that might reflect her own alienation and fear. But it also reminded me of the New York I had first encountered when I came here from Israel when I was 10. My mother and I started off in the village before giving up and moving, yes, to Brooklyn, then Queens. I told the curator that back then, Malika and many other people we knew felt a violent culmination coming. Not another September 11th, but something domestic aroused or revitalized by September 11th that would pull everything apart. Malika had talked about her project as a kind of negative fantasy, an imagined apocalypse in place of the endless cycle of violence and amnesia that was America's actual history. It was a release, in other words, albeit a negative one. I had lost the thread of this swim. I realized I had been treading water for quite some time now without even being aware of it, without seeing anything around me, and for reasons I didn't really understand. I looked back at the dock, and it was still there, now empty, Diana gone. The trees were barely moving in the light breeze, and the sky above was piled with billowing clouds, white and gilded at the edges. I kept swimming. The tupelo's leaves had already turned color, red against the deep green of the thick forest behind them. When I turned around, the blue water of the pond and the hazy trees in the background were like icons of themselves. Malika's brother Jesse had tried to call me while I was at the pond. I knew now why I'd become upset while I was swimming. It was not the curator, or even Malika's memory. but the premonition of the missed call. The female robot,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?